Hi there, this is Linda, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'm putting together my Project Life spread for the week of August 25th through August 31st, 2025, and I'm working with some older products from my stash, namely the Kiwi edition from Becky Higgins. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so this is the last week of August, and I have just a random assortment of photos. Not a lot happened this week. I feel like that's kind of been my summer, which is nice. I don't know, I've enjoyed having a slower pace. So let's see, I think those are all my photos that I have. So I have some space to add in some filler cards and journaling cards. And what I decided I'm going to do is I want to do some stash busting. And I pulled over all these cards, which are, this is an old Becky Higgins core kit. This is called the Jade Edition. And I'm going to use this for my spread. I feel like the colors are super fun. It kind of goes with the fun summery colors. And I just have so many cards in my stash. I just want to use some of them. So the big issue to me with these cards is they have the rounded corners. So I'm going to do everything I can to try to not use rounded corner cards and like kind of fix that as much as possible. The good thing is that there are so many of each card in here that I can use a couple of them to kind of create my own cards that don't have rounded corners. So I think I'm going to put you guys on fast forward or voiceover just from the start as I go through these, because I think it's going to take me a little bit to kind of go through them, figure out what cards I want to use in which pockets, and kind of get this one put together. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to start by going through all of the cards in this kit, and I kind of got a little sidetracked here and decided to kind of organize the kit itself because this has been sitting in my stash for a while and I just didn't really even know what was in here. And these collections, if you're not familiar with the Becky Higgins core kits, so these were the original Project Life kits, and they come with a lot of cards of each design. So you can see I'm putting them in stacks of all the matching cards. Now this is the Kiwi edition, which is one of the later collections, not like it's somewhere in the middle of the time that she offered these collections. And because of that, it has less cards of each design than the original core kits. The original core kits had something like 20 of each card. This one looks like maybe like 6 or 7 or something like that. But there's still a lot of repeats. And so you'll see what I'm doing as I'm going through this. I am putting 2 of each card that I want to use in a stack on my layout and just kind of getting an idea of what cards I want to include. And I'm putting 2 because I'm going to use one of those cards to get rid of the rounded corners. And I'll share a little bit more about that as we get to that. I'm also just taking this time to go through the cards and see what is in this kit and organize them, because some of them did get kind of separated in my stash from the matching cards, and you can see I'm trying to keep matching cards together. And at the end of this process, not in this video, but off camera, I'm going to go through and just kind of organize these in my stash a little bit better so that they are easier to access in the future. I'm going through all of these stacks though. So essentially what I did was I pulled over all of these cards from my Project Life card storage and I just put them in stacks on my desk, and I'm just going through those stacks as I'm deciding what is going to go where. You can see me kind of pointing to the different cards and looking at my spread, just getting a feel for what stories I want to tell on this spread and how I want to have those laid out. So these core kits have a lot of filler cards and journal cards and a lot of sentiments. And I'm just kind of going through and seeing what my options are in this kit to match with the stories I have to tell this week. So this kit, you can see, has this kind of brush lettering design on some of the cards, and it's got some cursive on some of the other cards. And I'm just kind of going through and balancing out the different designs so I don't have too many obvious repeats, but enough that the kit or the spread clearly coordinates. You can see that these kits are primarily 3x4 cards. If you're not familiar with them, there are a lot of 3x4 cards and not that many 4x6 cards. Some of the 4x6 cards are designed to be title cards. So these core kits were kind of designed with a specific approach to project life in mind. And this project has very much evolved through the years and people approach it in very different ways. But the original way that Becky Higgins conceptualized it was that you would do weekly spreads and you would have a title card for your week and you would have your photos in 4x6 pockets and you would have 3x4 pockets with journaling and fillers. So there really isn't a lot of 4x6 filler cards. They're mostly title cards and some additional journaling ones that are designed to fold in half and put in a 3x4 pocket. I don't use them in that way, but that is what I'm pulling from to put this spread together. So here you can see me starting to work on the spread, and what I'm doing is getting rid of those rounded corners. So how I'm doing this is I am cutting a card that matches in half and I am flipping it over or reordering the pieces so that there are square corners. It's hard to explain, but if you watch how I'm doing it on screen, it'll make a little bit more sense. So this is not a perfect science. It doesn't actually fix it entirely, but it definitely, especially when they're in the pockets and you're looking at the spread as a whole, you don't really see those rounded corners anymore when there is something behind it. For the ones that have a little bit more of a pattern, it's not going to be a perfect match. So like the one that says I love taking pictures of you, it's just a solid color in the background, so it is going to be a perfect match. Other ones you'll see, like this one has this grid on it, it's not going to be perfect, and you can see I'm kind of like messing around with how I want to do it to get it to fit as best as possible. So I took like that solid part, that solid blue to do the top, and then the grid part to do the bottom, and it's not going to be perfect, but it works. For that card in the middle of the left-hand side, there is that heart. That was a 4x6 card. So it was very easy to just cut that one down to 3x4, and I didn't have to worry about the corners at all because I was using a smaller piece. So that's a great way to adapt these cards as well. So with this star one, it is a much busier pattern. I was trying to find a way to kind of line up the pattern and it wasn't going to happen. So I just put them on there. And the stars don't line up perfectly in the corners, but honestly, you can't really tell, especially with it in the pocket, unless you're looking really closely. So I'm creating my own title card by cutting out this camera from one of the filler cards in the kit, and then I'm going to add a label sticker from my stash to add on the dates, and then I'm going to adhere both of those on top of that star patterned card that I created from the kit. So these core kits also have a lot of these kind of patterned cards, which are great for backgrounds. So for here, I'm able to kind of build a pattern on top of this pattern card. I'm also going to use a pattern card to create a background for one of my photos. You'll see that in a little bit on the right-hand side. But for now, I'm just kind of adhering those in place and kind of working out, trying to decide what I want to put on the spread overall. I like to go back and forth between doing my journaling cards and working on other parts of the spread because the journaling, I think, is the hardest part for me. Although I love journaling, I don't necessarily love journaling in project life or on scrapbook layouts. I don't know, I have to think more. I tend to watch TV while scrapbooking, so I have to kind of pause my show to do the journaling and my hand gets tired. So I tend to do one journaling card and then work on something else and then come back to it. So this one here, I had a larger work story to tell, and so I decided to tell that story on this card. When I approach my journaling and project life, I tend to approach it based on themes. So sometimes when people do a weekly project life, they think that their journaling should say, okay, this is what I did on Monday, this is what I did on Tuesday, and you can definitely approach this project in that way. However, through the years, I have decided that that does not really work for me in most spreads. Occasionally I will do that, but most of the time what I'm going to do is group my stories together in themes. So that pink card is all about this work thing that was happening this week called a focus group, and that took place on Monday and Tuesday. So I'm just writing the story on that pink card as it relates to the focus group overall for the week. I'm also going to have some other themed stories, and I'll tell you a little bit more about those as I get to them. I'm working now on the right-hand side of my spread and creating my cards to fill my pockets. Here you're seeing how I'm going to create a background from this 3x4 for a 4x6 pocket. So I could have cropped a piece of 4x6 like scratch paper to have the size, but instead I'm just going to use this photo as a template. And I cut this 3x4 card in pieces, and then I'm flipping them, swapping the two sides so that the rounded corners will be behind my photo of my house. And then I'm just going to adhere the photo on the edge of the card to create a 4x6 card. Now, I think it wasn't quite big enough, and you can see a little bit of the rounded corner, so I was struggling with that a little, but I decided that it was fine. I definitely could have used 2 3x4 cards so that I had plenty of space to do it. For this card here, it kind of pained me to cut it down to create a backing for this card to have the corners, because I love this card so much, but then I had to remind myself I love this card a lot, but I am not going to want to use it 10 times or however many are in the kit. So just using up 2 of them on the spread will be very helpful for stash busting. And using the cards like double like this definitely makes the stash busting from the spread like go so much faster. So these core kits, I feel like they would last forever, but by using so many cards in one spread, I'm actually going to put a dent in the kit, which makes me super happy. I do love the products, and so part of me is like, oh no, I want to hoard them. But at the same time, I have so many, and there are so many repeats that I feel like I'd be really kind of excited to use up the last one of a particular design. So for this one, again, there's a pattern on it, so I'm just cropping it strategically to try to get the best backing that I can to create the background for it. I really liked this as a journaling card. Something I do like about these core kits is they have some of these journaling cards that have space for just a little bit of words, but not an entire card, which is just nice to be able to tell a shorter story. So for this one, I told the story about doing yard work on Sunday morning. And I'm going to put this next to that photo of my house, which I took Sunday morning after I did yard work. I had to just kind of like prune my plants back again. I've kind of neglected them a bit this summer, and I really wanted to do it one more time before it starts getting too cold to prune back the plants and just pick some weeds and that kind of thing. So I was proud of myself for getting that done super early on Sunday before I sat down to breakfast. And I love that kind of accomplished feeling I get when I sit down Sunday morning, having already done something like that. So it was great to do that and great to document it. For this card, we celebrated my boyfriend's mom's birthday, so I just wanted to make a note of that as a story, and that I want to put next to that picture of my ice cream, which was from that day, so I wanted to have those two together. I'm thinking about rearranging my spread here because those 2 cards on the right-hand side, the filler card that I said I really love with the camera on it, and the journaling that says, that's about the gardening, both look too similar. They have that same scripty font, so I'm going to want to split those cards up, but I wasn't entirely sure how I wanted to do that. So I'm just going to sit on it and move on to something else. I pulled a couple of the cards from the kit that had this large brush lettering on them, and I'm going to use them to create my own embellishments. So another way that I like to use up these core kits is to cut up the cards to create embellishments. So these core kits, of course, came with a ton of cards, but they don't come with any embellishments. So you can, of course, pair them with things from your stash, or you can cut them up to make their own embellishments. And I'm going to do a little bit of both on this spread. So for this one, I cut out the word today, and I'm going to adhere it down on top of some white striped washi from my stash just to add a little bit of decor onto this photo of my house. I'm going to do a similar thing with that word love up there on that photo of pumpkin, but I don't think I'm going to do it right away. You can see I'm just pausing a little bit to kind of think about what I want to do next. As I'm working on these spreads, I'm thinking about the overall spread and kind of how it's going to look as I do each card. So when I first started doing Project Life over 10 years ago now, I used to approach each pocket as its own little kind of scrapbook layout, and they would all come together for this very eclectic spread. Now I try to look at the overall spread more than each pocket and think about how the things coordinate across the page. You might like the other approach. That's totally fine. There's no right answer. I'm just kind of sharing that because that is how I currently approach my project, and it might be something you don't really think about when approaching yours. So you can think about that as far as how you like to lay out your page. On this card here, I decided I wanted to document specifically what happened on Friday, because there was just a few different micro stories on that day that I thought were worth noting. And because the way this card is designed to tell the story of one specific day. So back to how I format my journaling, like I said, most of my journaling is based on themes, but here I did do one that was based on the story of a specific day. And I will do that every so often when there is kind of a busy day that I feel like warrants its own card, because the story of the day is in itself kind of, I don't know, it just kind of flows together rather than breaking apart what happened that day by theme. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm moving on now to adding the word love onto this photo of pumpkin. When selecting my photos for this spread, I actually didn't have any horizontal photos this week, and I wanted to fill those 2 4x6 pockets, especially because I knew I was working with one of these Becky Higgins core kits, and I wasn't going to have 4x6 cards that I wanted to use because, like I said, these kits are primarily 3x4 cards. So that photo of pumpkin at the top that is currently cut off on the page, on the screen, was originally a vertical photo, and I just cropped it to be horizontal in Photoshop so that I could print it to be 4x6. And the photo of my house was again originally vertical, and I cropped it to be a square, and I printed it to be 4x4 so that I could put it in a 4x6 pocket. I really like doing that with photos, to print them as 4x4 in a 4x6 pocket, because it does give you space to add a little bit of background decor like I did here, or you could add some journaling. On that card there, I journaled about December Daily, because another theme of this week was that there was a December Daily. December Daily was released this week, so they went on sale on the Tuesday. And so I had just kind of a lot going on around that. Just chatting with my friends, all the excitement in the community about December Daily. So I wanted to document that as well. On this card here, I'm including a bullet point list. So this is something I do in pretty much every Project Life spread, but I create a bullet point list where I talk about just little micro stories from the week that didn't end up on any of my other cards or photos, and just random stuff that happened. So for this week, I just wanted to document that I was feeling a lot of burnout. It was starting to feel like fall weather a little bit. I was training a new employee. There was new SVU on Hulu, so I was watching that. And that I've been trying to stick with yoga a little bit more, or as usual, I've been sticking with yoga, but this week I skipped a few more days than usual because I wasn't feeling so good. So I just wanted to document that. And then I'm moving on to embellishing. So I have quite a few 3x4 photos, and I wanted to have some sort of embellishment on them. And so I pulled this card from the kit that has these really cute hearts on it. And I decided to cut some of them out to create my own embellishments. So I ended up cutting out 4 of them, and I'm going to adhere them onto 4 of my 3x4 photos. So that will be all except for one, which I do have it on the one with the refrigerator there, but I will end up moving it to the one with my breakfast. Here you can see. And I'm just going to add these photos, or these hearts on each of these photos. And then I decide that I want to add a few more embellishments on them to create some embellishment clusters. Before I do that though, I am going to take quite a few of these cards, the 2 where I wrote down or cut out those letters and the hearts, over to my sewing machine, and then I stitch them all down. I currently have black thread in my sewing machine, so that's what I'm using. I tend to change my thread only every so often, and then whatever color's in there, I try to make it work because it's kind of a pain to change. I've had black for quite a while now. I probably will go back to white. I tend to do both of those colors most frequently. When I stitch it on my sewing machine, what I'm doing now is I just pull the ends of the thread through to the back, and then I tape them down with Scotch tape. And that is going to hold it in place, and you're not going to see any knots or anything on the front of the card. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this for all of these. And then what I'm going to do is create some embellishment clusters on top of those hearts. So the one that's on the photo of my hydrangeas there was a heart that's in that like scripty font. So it seemed kind of busy. So I'm not going to add anything on top of that one, but I will add something on the other 3 hearts. I'll talk about that in a little bit when I get there. At this point though, I'm just kind of thinking about the overall what I want this spread to look like, and making sure that I have a good balance of embellishments and cards that are not super busy. So another thing to think about with Project Life, when I first started doing this project, I made every single pocket its own kind of masterpiece. In a way, it had embellishments, it had journaling, whatever it was, there was a lot going on. Now I like to leave some pockets completely plain. So that photo of my fridge in the top, which you might be wondering why there's a photo of my fridge, there's actually a box next to it. My cat is sitting in that box. So that photo is going to stay completely unembellished. And I like to include at least one photo each spread that doesn't have any embellishments on it, because I feel like it can get too busy when you have stuff going on in every single pocket. I also like to repeat my embellishments across the spread because that makes it seem more cohesive and less busy. So how I'm doing these 3 hearts is I'm adding a white word phrase strip onto each of them. And then I'm going to pair that with a black chipboard star. You can see I have those stars there. I believe that those are from Ali Edwards. I think they were maybe from like the Star mini kit. Oh, not mini kit, the Star Quarterly kit, but I'm not sure. They might have been from December Daily, but I do really like those little chipboard stars. And the word phrase strips were all from Ali Edwards as well. I'm going to just add one of these on each of those hearts, and I'm going to leave that one with the script plain. And then I also added one into the center of the camera on my title card and in the center of the O on that today, just to kind of tie everything together and add a little bit of dimension. When you cut your embellishments out of cards, one of the things that you run into is that everything on your spread is flat. So adding the stitching and those chipboard pieces definitely helped to add a little bit of dimension to the spread so that it wasn't quite so flat. I'm moving some things around now because, like I said, I didn't like those 2 cards next to each other with that same script font. And then I wanted that I love taking pictures of you filler card next to the photo of pumpkin. And, I just wanted everything to be a little bit more balanced. So I'm thinking about that as I'm rearranging everything before I slip it into the pocket. At the beginning of my spread, I do kind of have a loose idea of what is going to be in each pocket, but I do always kind of check this again at the end, because sometimes cards look like they might look nice together, but then once you fill them in with your journaling and embellishments and they're totally done, they might just look a little bit different. So I'm just slipping everything into the pocket, doing that final check to make sure I like everything, I like the order it's in, and I'm happy with how this one came out. This spread does have a little bit more journaling than usual because I just didn't have that many photos this week, so I had to fill more pockets with some products, but that's good because I was able to really use up this kit. Here's a look at that completed spread. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye!